Well, we are glad to be back with you today. This is Austin Gardner and Jeff Bush, Leadership with Vision. I guess you know that. How could you forget one good-looking face and one ugly one? I'll let you guess. I don't have to cover mine up. I just go ahead and admit mine's ugly. But anyway, glad that you are here with us and looking forward to talking to you today. We just finished up the one in Spanish and the podcast in Spanish and Facebook Live there. And so now we are ready to go back to work here in English. And Brendan Wong is with us. He was over there in Spanish and even said ha ha. And Brendan, if you'd like, why don't you tell us what you said ha ha about? Because we doubted your, look at him over here. He says hola. Yeah.
He's good.
And Mackenzie has joined us and we appreciate that. And Jason Mann is here with us and we thank you for that. So we're going to continue on putting into practice Paul's missionary methods. And we have gotten down to quite a few things yesterday. And Brendan Wong said he's a gringo. That's what I called you over there. You're over here. You're just a Hawaiian, buddy.
You're a Howley.
No, we're the Howleys.
Oh, we're the Howleys.
That's right. Good night. You're going to let him make fun of us. And Daniel Cooper, thank you for joining us also. Well, we're talking about how to put things in. There's Matt Yeager from Bolivia with a hey, y'all. We're talking about how to put things into practice as you do Paul's methods. And hey, did we do a good job? Did you finish out that post in Spanish?
Yes.
Or we lost it? Okay.
We got it.
So here's what we end to do, Ed. Never do what they can do. Work yourself out of a job. Put them to doing it as soon as possible. It's our tendency to think that they cannot do it as well as we can, so we never let them have it. Also, we like to do it, and we keep doing it instead of turning it over to them. So I want to remind you that you must let. Okay, John Wall said I can't understand. Oh, I can understand that one. So I want to remind you that you must let other people. Mackenzie is watching, but you never call her name out. Hey, Mackenzie, and Adam Ragsdale, and Daniel Cooper, who can't spell. But you see, when you're starting on the mission field, they don't know what you know. They don't know how to do the work like you know how to do the work, but you've got to let go. Go ahead, Jeff. No, I'm going to let go.
Let go and let God. Pastor already mentioned we start playing all the positions. I think we started out with speaking about the Apostle Paul's methods by the chief cities and the open doors and all these. Now we're applying these Apostle Paul's methods. And one of those, we're playing all the positions, but we very quickly turn it over. I remind you that a missionary one day will leave the field, whether it's by death or whether it's by furlough or sickness or the government kicks you out, paperwork, whatever it is, you will one day leave. And what's going to happen afterwards? Well, for the big game, you have to have all the practices. And right now, those planned absences, those preparing them, those delegating, a little bit of things that we spoke about, and we'll speak a little bit more about them. But you as a missionary, as the American, sometimes it is hard to let go. We know more than them. We've been to Bible college, but we have to let go. We have to let other people have an opportunity, not to fail, but so they can learn. And if they do fail, we pick them back up. We help them go another step.
Well, your wife can play the piano, and so she doesn't want to let anybody else play the piano because she likes playing the piano. And, that's a good thing is your wife can play the piano. But what is the main job? Playing the piano or making sure somebody there can play the piano because we're leaving and we're going somewhere else. So we want to turn loose. If a person can do even half as good as you, two of them can do as much as you. And so you're multiplying yourself. The Lord Jesus turned over the entire ministry to 12 men. One of them was a dud. And so he gave them the power to do that. So I'm challenging you to, from the beginning, let somebody else open the door, let somebody count the offering, let somebody see to it the building's set up, let somebody lead the music, let somebody do an offering devotional. Start giving them jobs and letting them do the work. And you feel free to comment, ask questions, or discuss it, and we'll be glad to discuss that with you. Any further comments on that one, Jeff?
I remind you that letting somebody do the job is so that they can learn, so they can prepare for that. Delegation has very little to do with getting them to do something so that you don't have to do anything. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about being lazy. We're talking about we want to train, we want to help, we want to prepare, equip other men for the ministry. And multiplication is so much better than addition. And so we can multiply ourselves, but we have to teach them. They're not just going to be yes men in our church to say amen. That's not what we're teaching. We're teaching others to be leaders, because those leaders will bring other people. They will start other churches, other ministries. And ministry will go a lot further if we can train leaders to do the work.
Boy, we really appreciate you saying that you like this and click on like there. That I think that helps us get the word out more. And then when you share the video with others, that helps, and we sure appreciate that. And thank you for coming along with us, Brady. Remember, people will never rise above what you expect of them. So expect them to do well. Expect them to be used of God. Expect God to do big things with them, and that's how you're going to get more out of them. They want to please you. They want to do a good job. They're afraid you don't like them. They're afraid you don't believe in them. So help them know you do believe.
There are so many fallacies in the mind of other people. Maybe, well, I'm not American. I don't have the same color skin or speak the same language or have the same amount of money. That has very little to do with the success of one person. And so we want to believe in them. We want to have that double vision, see them where they are, see them where they can be, and believe enough to teach them, to give them those opportunities, to delegate, to help them along the way so they can become greater people. And they can serve the Lord better because we are the ones that are helping them out.
Kevin, you said that you like the process that we taught about doing it, and they watched and teaching them how to do it, then letting them do it and correcting them. Then at the end, they do it on their own or something like that. I'd like to take credit for that, but a guy named Bill Hall wrote that, and we steal everything. I don't know anything. I got everything out of a book. But anyway, that is a good point. We want that. Thank you for being with us, Andres and Jonathan Anderson. We thank you for being here. So, you remember, you start by playing all the positions in the ministry of the church. Then you begin training them one by one to take the different positions until you can be the quarterback and they take all the other positions. Then you work until you can be the coach. And then after that, you stop playing. You're not playing any positions, and you become the general manager. And then finally, you have totally out of the picture and they've taken over. So second you arrive on the field, you have one thing in mind: I'm out of here.
You know, Pastor, there might be some people who are thinking, well, what about when somebody's ready to preach? Does that mean I don't preach anymore? I just sit down and I listen to them? Because so maybe you can fix that, at least that
I think
thought.
That's a great question. I would never let them preach if I was there, because I like preaching and I'm going to preach. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start more than one church. And so I got a guy over here in this church and a guy in this church, and I'm preaching in more than one church. And so when I leave, he can preach. I'll let people preach a little. This coming Sunday night at Vision, we will be having youth night. And so I won't preach. I'll just go to church, and that'll feel very strange for me, but I will be doing that. And but on a normal thing, what I'm going to try to do is start a bunch of churches all over the place. So at the same time, I may be pastoring 3 or 4 churches, and I pastor those churches. I'm traveling, and so they've got a Sunday school class, they've got a cell group going, they've got discipleship going, they preach when I'm traveling, and so I am going to let them do it. I'm going to let them baptize. I'm going to let them do the Lord's Supper. I'm going to have 5-minute preachers in most services, and so yes, we are definitely going to put them to work, but we're not going to step out of the way.
Adam Ragsdale has a question. Says, what would be the proper course of action if you move on from one church to start another church, leaving the first church in the hands of a national pastor, and then the national pastor leaves that church or leaves the ministry altogether, and then leaves that first church without a pastor?
Well, that's a very good question. If you recall, I'm going to probably have a model church, or some people would call it a mother church. I would not use it in that sense. So I am not really going to be turning that main church over. And so I would be working at both. But once I have organized the church, I step away from it, Adam, because I figure it's like my kids getting married. They don't want me in the room. They don't want me telling them how to run their family. My son doesn't want me telling his wife what to do. They don't want me telling them how to raise their kids. They want to come to me when they want to come to me, and that's what I do. So if I had left that church, I would be trying to do things so that that church would feel close to me, and so that brother would feel close to me, or those people would feel close to me, and they come ask me for help. Because if they don't ask, I'm not going to tell them to do anything. If they don't ask, I'm not going to tell them to do anything. So that means that in the process of training all these people, I'm going to have a monthly pastors fellowship. and I'm going to try to get all the pastors to come, and I'm going to develop a real close relationship with them. I'm going to have family camp and have all the churches come, so all the churches know me and they know other missionaries and other pastors on the team. I am going to have a yearly pastors camp, family camp, pastors camp, youth camp, children's camp. I'm going to be doing all of this stuff all the time, so that if somebody were to step away, that church probably knows me well enough. That church probably knows me well enough to continue asking me questions.
Well, Brennan has a question. What would happen if you stepped away or you stepped in without their asking?
Well, I just don't think it's right. I think you could do that, but I kind of think that you got to respect the other person. And so once we organize a church and we tell them this is your church, then I don't do that. So I think that, you said resentment or more trouble, and I would just say to you, I don't want to do that. I don't want, I've had my children live in my basement. And you know what? I never go in the basement. I never go into their part of the house without an invitation. I would never open the door and walk in. I would always try to show them the respect that I would show to somebody who wasn't my child. And so as I start a church, if I want that pastor to be treated with that kind of leadership and that kind of respect, I've got to treat him that way. So that's kind of where I'm headed with that.
I would have two different thoughts, Pastor. One would be, probably everybody who's listening on here is, you probably have your own children, or at least you're married. You'd probably not take it very well if your dad called and said, son, I need to talk to you about some things. You need to work this out, and you need to start disciplining your children in this way, or you need to clean up your room. You'd probably say, come on, Dad, I'm a grown-up. Well, in the same way, that church is autonomous, and because of that, they have...
That's a big word. It means self-governing.
And you have to give them their room. And I would say on the other, flip side of that is it's your responsibility as the leader. You don't turn that church over to somebody who's a novice, somebody who's not ready for it. So we've spent plenty of time. We're not just finding, okay, during this one, this one term, I'm going to hurry up and turn it over. And man, I'm pressed for time. Got to go on furlough. Got to hurry up and turn it over. Never do that, because you will regret it and things will happen. Pastor, you mentioned a couple different ways of the philosophies. Maybe we can run back through that about one term or about all your life or one per year or multiple churches. Maybe you can go back through that.
Well, we have stated that I would have a mother church or model church. I prefer the term model church because it's not going to control anybody. And so we're going to get to your comments. We saw them. They're flashing by, and we appreciate it. We've had up to 25 people watching, and man, we are so honored that you take the time to spend with us, and we love the conversation, so keep the questions coming in the discussion. So I'm not going to turn that church over till the pastor's married, till they got a good number of strong men, until we've helped them mature enough that they could, what can I say? They can make decisions. So we're not in a hurry. It's like raising your kids. You don't want your daughter getting married at 16.
Dustin Brown says, if you see the pastor of one of the churches you turn over get into sin or the wrong direction doctrinally, do you ever see the need to step back in? If not, what do you do to help the church thrive or get the gospel out to that area?
I do not step back in, Dustin. I appreciate that. As long as that church is a mission and we have not turned it over to them yet, then I would step in. But unless they've quit being a mission, we're not stepping in. So like once we've organized it, once they have become a church, I would tip my hat to the pastor. I would lose all the investment I made in that building and all that, because I would have spent a lot of money helping them. But that's why I want the monthly pastors fellowship meetings. That's why I want the annual pastor school. I would like to probably set up a podcast and a website, a magazine, every way I can to keep the good doctrine going to them.
I would say another thing to think about is if we do church planning or leader training like we do child raising our kids, it might make a little bit more sense to us. So we do not just turn it over right away. That would be like giving our 14-year-old a brand new Corvette. It's probably just not the best thing. He's going to rev that baby up and run off the road. We take the time, we teach them, and then we turn it over. And then the other would be, once that church is turned over, now it's governing itself, that church is like your grown son. So you have influence, but not necessarily do you have the authority. And so he lives elsewhere. He has his own family. you have influence. You can say, hey, son, can we talk about something? Or to that pastor, hey, I'm thinking, some things, you might need some help. In a roundabout way, you tell him, you help him until he opens that door. But you don't force yourself on that person.
So thank you for giving us those likes. And there's like 23 people watching right now, and we're bouncing around about 25. I'm just praying God goes ahead and increases our attendance at this Facebook church. But
Virtual church that we have.
Virtual church. Thank you for being here and with us. And so that brings us to another question here from Jonathan Anderson.
Says, would you invite other pastors to your monthly fellowship, or the time when you get all the ministry leaders together once a year? Or is it a close fellowship with just those that you have influenced?
Well, I typically don't want to bring everybody in because most likely I'm paying for it, for one. And so that would up my cost. And number two, I couldn't be as open and tell the guys what I really think. And I'd have to be a lot more political. So I typically would not bring in other people unless they were very, very close to me, unless I brought them in to speak. But I want to develop a team mentality, and I want to work with these guys, and I want to try to keep us together as long as I can.
Well, Brennan has another question. Would you delay a furlough if they are not ready, or just make sure they are trained by the time of your furlough?
Well, no, I probably wouldn't delay my furlough. I love furlough, and I know a lot of you don't like furloughs, but I like furlough because it's like the end of the football game. You don't have any choice. You've got to leave. Now, you don't really have to leave, but having an established deadline forces you. And so I would bust it. I'd work 70 hours a week if I had to. I'd have extra classes. I'd have extra preaching things. I'd do everything I could so I wouldn't have to. Now, when I leave, they're not turned over on their own. I am coming back. I may come back in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to visit with them. I may be in touch with them via Skype. But the leaving helps them grow, and so I'm going to do all I can to stay to be out there on furlough at the right time.
Pastor, I don't mean to get us off of subject, but there's several reasons I know that you teach about a furlough, and it's important, a furlough, not just for you or not just for visiting a church or maybe even getting extra support for your children, for your family, but also for that church there. And so if you never leave them, they never have an opportunity to grow themselves, to learn. And that can go in some of our planned absences. Maybe we got some more questions, Pastor. Maybe we can talk just for a second about planned absences.
Well, the whole deal is I need to let them walk by themselves. So it's kind of like you carried your baby a long time and now you're letting your baby walk. You're holding their hand, and finally you need to let go of their hand and let them go and let them do their thing. And so leaving to go on a vacation, leaving to go preach in another city, coming late, preaching in another part of the town, forces your people to step up. People rise to the challenge, so they need to get a challenge. They rise to the challenge, so they need to get a challenge. So I'm challenging you to give them a challenge.
Okay, we have some more questions here, Pastor. Let me read some of those. Our friend John Walls, Taiwan, he says, to cease being a mission, does a church need to fully support its pastor?
Not necessarily, but I am going to really push for that. And you need to understand, for me to organize a church into a church, I'm probably going to wait years. I need you to hear that, years. The pastors are brand new. They've not been saved long. They've not dealt with much temptation. They're definitely inexperienced, which gets us in trouble all the time. And so if they are having to work with me, and see, as long as it's a mission, I'll go in there and remove them. I'll go in there and say, hey, you got to step down. We're putting another pastor in here. As long as it's a mission, it's like a Sunday school class out of our church. And so, no, I don't organize them quickly. And I don't, let me see, what was the, I don't want to turn it over. So it's going to take me a long time to get around to doing that. So I'm going to watch the guy grow, the church grow, and everything else.
So Pastor says years for organizing a church. I think we have to be careful of our motive. If we're not careful, we want to, I just for the prayer letter or just for people to know, and I want to start all these churches and do all this. If we're not careful, we're like a child who puts all this food on their plate and they cannot eat it all. And I think it's better get it done right. And yeah, praise the Lord, multiple churches. Let's go for many, but let's not hurt the people and hurt the cause just because we want the credit.
And you can start a lot of churches and just leave them as missions as they're moving. The people won't know there's any difference in that. And so just take your time on getting them to full grown and recognizing them. And we have Bob Ford with us, and Bob Ford's with Bearing Precious Seed. What a man of God, very greatly used of God. And Brother Ford, I'm honored that you're here. Jason, man, you said thank you for our time. Well, I thank all of you for your time. What a privilege that we get to talk to you.
Here's another question from Aaron Vance in Columbia. We have a lot of people visiting us right now, and thank you guys for your time for the questions. Aaron Vance says this: what if there are several men, mostly at the same level of maturity and training? When is it time to turn over the work, either permanently or temporarily? Would you divide up the responsibilities equally?
Well, typically what I do is I start more in one church. So I'd put one guy here and one guy here, but I'd stay as a pastor. I'd be pastor in this one, pastor in this one, and pastor in this one, and then they could all be working if they're going into ministry. I doubt very many of our churches are going to be able to financially afford a pastor, an assistant pastor, and a children's pastor, and a teen pastor. And so I'm working on a model of what can be left when I'm gone. And when they don't have my money and they don't have my help, I'm not sure they can keep this thing going. So I probably would have all of them working in the church, and I'd tell them we're doing this together until we move and start other churches somewhere.
Okay, Matt Yeager has a question from Bolivia. He says, if the pastor falls into sin, the missionary should just let it go, or to what extent should he deal with the pastor, such as Matthew chapter number 18. And Pastor, if you'd allow me, just say very quickly, Matt, I think we have to realize, like we've already stated, there is a point where that church is on its own. And so, yeah, the Matthew 18 principle, we go by ourselves. We don't make this a whole church thing. But at the same time, just remember, if your cousin is in adultery and you know it's not your job to walk in their house and tell the wife, sit down, I need to tell you something, you might need to go talk to your cousin by yourself, but you don't have the right to go in his house and fix his family or his marriage or anything else. That's his, and you want to help them. So there's got to be a discretionary level there.
So somewhere along the way, you have to decide when you're not in charge. So as long as it's your ministry and it's a mission or a church that you're in charge of, then take all the steps. Now, I wouldn't let the guy preach in my church. I wouldn't let him preach at an event we handled. I wouldn't let him preach at the camp. I probably wouldn't even let him come to camp. I would say, you messed up. Till you get your life right, I'm sorry. And anything I'm in charge of, you're out of it. But you got to remember, he's not a member of my church, so I don't have any right to go chew him out. I don't have any right to step in there and push him to do what I want him to do, because that's why I take a long time before I turn the church over, but I still have guys mess up.
We remember, we're not the Catholic Church that has the big Pope up at top and we take care of everything. That's not what a missionary is.
That would be the mother church, which we don't believe in. We believe in the indigenous church, which is a self-governing church. A self-governing church. And that means that when I've turned them over, they're self-governing. And so I have to let them go. They're not in my... I don't get to go across town to the other church and correct their members, if you get the idea.
Okay.
Did you skip anything, Aaron?
I did. I've got another question here. Let's see. On Aaron Vance, continuing that same question about should he divide up the work when he leaves. He's specifically talking about furlough. And so when he goes, do you turn it over to somebody permanently when you go off for a furlough, temporarily? Or do you divide up the responsibilities? How do you do it when you go on furlough?
I want to keep I like the model church. And so, Aaron, I am probably not going to turn the church over unless I turn it over by saying this: while I'm gone for this year, I'd like you to let this guy be the pastor. And when I come back, if you want him, you can vote to keep him, or you can let me come back. And so I leave it up to the church. And so when I left, I let them vote. And when I came back, I let them vote. But if you got several, then probably there's a real problem. You got a whole bunch of alpha males in the same room. You might have some problems in that church. That's why I prefer to start more churches and separate my alpha males.
So Dustin Brown has a question going back, not intervening with the autonomy of the church. Is this a reason we want to build strong men in these churches so the church can remove or correct a pastor if he goes into sin or heresy?
Thank you for those likes.
Yes, we appreciate it. And thank you for those that are joining us still. We appreciate that very much. So yes, I remind you, Dustin, thank you for the question. We take a long time with that person before. We give him the planned absences, whether it's on a furlough or whether it's you out preaching. We want to give that guy many opportunities. So we do not turn over the church until they are ready. And in fact, many of the times, Pastor would say that we arrive late to a service. And you say, why do you arrive late? Well, somebody else needs to open the door. Somebody needs to turn on the lights. And they need to start the song service, the music or the announcements, whatever, without you. Because if they wait until you arrive, the missionary, then that means it's going to fall apart when you go on furlough or when you end up leaving. They need to run everything by themselves. So when they can run everything by themselves, now they're in a position. You still have a position of influence, but now they're ready. And when they are ready, there's that authority, as we've already spoken, when it's finally an autonomous church. But we do not want to turn it over until they are totally ready and they're prepared. They're not a novice, as the Bible says.
Obviously, Dustin, we never know when that pastor is ready like we want to. And you're right, we got to do a lot of things to train men. So in my group of churches, I'd have training for deacons for everybody. I'd invite all the men in the whole city to come and be with me. In pastor school, I would have a pastor school when I got to that place. And I had lots of churches, and I'd have classes for Sunday school teachers and classes for deacons and classes for assistants and everything. And so, yes, I do want to train very strong leaders, because without strong leaders, they wouldn't be able to take care of their pastor. And so 100% we agree with you that you have to have strong laymen and you have to teach them and be able to take care of that.
I also, we remember that Paul didn't just simply put somebody in a position. I believe he wrote those letters to encourage them. He went by there to help them out. And so it's part of your responsibility, our responsibility. We don't just put somebody in a position, but we also encourage them. We help them. We give them the tools, the material, the books, the study, whatever they need. Remember, as a missionary, you're only a success when they are success. So if they're learning more because you've given them these tools, they're preaching better sermons, reaching more people, praise the Lord, they're a success. And so are you, because you trained that person and helped them out.
So just remember, we are turning over as much as we can to them. That's been our goal from day one, to start turning things over to them as they get capable and fit. And that's why we've got those planned absences going, and that's why we're working with that in mind.
Okay, Jason Mann from Hungary has another question for us. Says, what are your thoughts on a missionary taking over a church on the field that is without a pastor? Your thoughts?
Keep talking while I let somebody in the house there, buddy.
Well, that's wonderful. So yes, pastor's testimony would be that he took over a church when he arrived to Peru, and he can share more about that himself. I think we need to be careful. You know, there might be a church in need. That might be a self-start, a kickoff to begin the ministry. That could be a help. Remember, it's not all about...
That wasn't real good.
So it's not all about who gets the credit. So maybe something's already kicked off. Maybe somebody is already saved and knows something about the ministry. Hey, man, if that's where God puts you, then use that and go on, Pastor.
I think that you can you can take over a church, but I think you have to be real careful, because sometimes people ask you to take over a church and they just want to use you because you're a missionary. They want you to buy a building and everything. And so, I would make sure all the paperwork was right. For example, if they ask you to come and they have a incorporation papers, I would ask, I want to be on those. I want to be in such a way that, because they're going to ask for a lot of investment from me, and then they may just kick me out. So I'm going to be a little more careful than just saying, wow, I got a church given to me. Now, when I took over the church in Peru, there was like one adult coming, and maybe 6 or 7 adults altogether at any time, and a bunch of children. And so I didn't really take over much. There were 40 chairs, a table, and a little podium that sat on the table, or a little pulpit kind of thing that sat on the table. So I didn't have much. The rent was $4. So you just want to make sure what you're getting into. So check well, look under the carpet, see what's been swept under there, see what's happening before you just take over a church.
Well, we have about a minute left before we
you know what,
close out.
We're going to preach at Forest Hills, so why don't we just take about 15 or 20 extra minutes today?
Okay. Well, we've got, like I said the first time, we've got about 15 minutes to continue our program here.
In Spanish, somebody got smart and said 2 independent Baptist preachers trying to share the same microphone. How hard that is, isn't it? So he's trying to take over. Okay. If you have in mind reaching your entire country, Look at them people. They like it that you're picking on me. Or maybe they like I'm picking on you. I don't know which.
Probably.
If you have in mind reaching your entire country, it will not be hard to need to be in other places doing other things so that leadership will develop. Remember that. You are working on doing lots of ministry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In a previous moment, we talked about the difference between a pastor and a missionary, and we have to be very careful. God didn't just put us on our little corner with our little section, and who cares about what happens with everybody else. Our goal is we want to see multiple churches. We want to see a lot of people. So it's very likely if you want to see the entire city and that country reach with the gospel, then you'll have more than just your one certain corner that you're worried about in getting the gospel.
You don't have to protect the turf because there's so much turf. You can divide the turf. There's plenty to go around. Glad to have you with us, Case and Bloom. Your future wife was watching earlier. I don't know if she is now or not. And so glad you're with us from down in Peru. So here's what I would say to you. Develop a sense of urgency in yourself and in them. Tell them time is short, souls are dying and going to hell, and what are we doing to get the gospel out? So I am not trying to build one big church. I'm not trying to get me a salary. I raise that. I'm trying to get churches going and train those guys where they can get out there and get the job done.
You know, we all have to motivate ourselves. It's important as when you're all by yourself, and a lot of people say, well, nobody talks to me, nobody emails me, nobody remembers me. Well, dear friend, as a missionary, you probably should realize you have to motivate yourself, discipline yourself. You have to kind of kickstart yourself. And so put things in front of you that are going to help remind you. You're reading your Bible. You're telling other people about Jesus. You're talking to other people. You're reading books. You need these different things because you need to see the urgency. You need to be reminded people are going to hell. We do believe that. You do need to be reminded you're going to leave and go back on a furlough. You do need to be reminded that you only have a certain amount of time. So remind yourself, motivate yourself, get a hold of books, read your Bible, motivate yourself, and do what you need to do to remember that urgency there.
Well, I see Jason Mann ask a question.
That is correct. Yes, sir. He said, thank you for the answer. What do you think about hiring a national as a full-time personal assistant to help in the beginning of the ministry, language, culture, and such things?
Well, I am 100% for it. Hire the right person. Do not give him long-term hire and don't give him a title. So I would say I'd like you to work with me for a week or a month. And then at the end of that time, we'll see if we work together more. And then I'd let him work with me for 2 months. And then I'd say, we'll check it out at 2 months. Eventually I decide, do I like him or don't I like him? Can I work with him or can I work with him? I don't want to get married to the guy. I want to date him until I know if I like him or not. So yeah, I'd take him for language help. I would take him for culture, and I would take him for doing ministry work. I mean, in other words, yes, definitely hire somebody if you can afford that. And, tons of things you can accomplish that way.
You know, I think as well in ministry, even when you start off, you need to have the same mindset as Pastor was just saying. In other words, if you need somebody to help you lead singing, you say, man, this guy's a prospect. Don't just tell him, hey, would you like to lead singing for us?
Don't do
Give him hey, I need somebody to help me out. Would you be willing to, for the next Sunday, to help us lead singing? Good. And if he does well, then, hey, man, this is going good. But let's go, hey, would you help me for a whole month? Man, I would love to see it. If it goes well, go for 6. And then finally you turn it over. You don't just, whether it's preaching or a Sunday school class or anything, you got to be very careful because you can hurt yourself and that person.
Very definitely. Let him lead one song. Let him lead a song in Sunday school. Let him lead a song at your house while you're training him. Don't jump out there and put the guy in to anything. Take your time. This is the work of God, and we can't just throw a guy in there.
Okay, Raleigh has a good question. What do you do to help the man you leave in place during furlough if the church rejects that man?
Well, then you shouldn't have left him in place. So why? See, here's the deal. You got a 4-year period. You have 48 months. You have 208 Sundays. You have 615 services. That's if y'all do more than once a week. Some of you guys are only doing once a week, and I would stop that. I'd add more services. But anyway, that's just me. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, just saying what I think you ought to do.
Well, amen, as they say in sign language.
But what you're going to do, is you're going to let this guy, he's going to work with you in the same way, that you would do the guy who's going to lead singing. So this guy, the church people, you're going to find out if they like him. You're watching how he reacts with them. You're watching if they like him or not. You're watching if they accept him or not. And that's how you determine whether or not you want this guy. So put him in front of the church. Let him lead. If the people all go, blah, we don't like that guy, then you start taking him back in the back room and say, let me show you how to get that fixed. And then if he doesn't get that fixed, then you'll just have to, he can be a Sunday school teacher. He should go be a taxi driver because he's going to have to learn to do it. So you never spring it on them at the last minute. They know what's coming. A year before you leave, they're like, we like this a guy, and he can take over for us.
I think, Pastor, that can actually go into 1 Timothy 3 and the prerequisites of being a pastor. He's apt to teach. So if people don't want to hear him, or he can't speak, he can't preach, then there might be some problems. He's probably not apt to teach. Just because he knows Bible verses or he thinks something doesn't mean he's necessarily the right one. So you better check it out. You don't want to let everything go down just because you like a certain person. That's probably not the best idea.
Live knowing that soon you will return to the States on furlough, and you will have to have someone trained to be the pastor. So if you live with a clock on the wall. Now, they told me at the mission I went with, and it was very good advice. They said, do not count down the days till you go back to the States. You should never count down the days. But at the same time, you should count down the days, because it's like you're in a ball game. If you're in the ninth inning, I mean, it's like the game's about to be over. If it's the fourth quarter in 3 minutes, that ought to affect the way you're playing the game. And so you should look up on the clock and say, man, I can see I have 4 years. 4 times 52 is 208. I got 208 weeks. I've already burned all of them. I only got 52 weeks left. I've got to push towards this. That means I can't relax. I got to keep pushing. So live like I'm leaving, and you'll get everybody ready to take over.
I think that attitude, that mindset would help all of us out, because we can't be lazy or nonchalant in the area. We have to know. That way, if we know that we're going to leave, that means we'll work towards it. But if we never think about it, we don't care, let's just let the time go by. It'll go by, and then we'll be ashamed. And I remind you, it's not our goal. It's not your goal. It should not be your goal as a missionary to turn it over to another American.
Oh,
we
no,
flip
please.
out, and he comes in. He'll take over. Do not.
That's Jeff's thing. Round of applause.
I'm learning sign language. And so, we want to turn it over to someone there. We want to be very careful about that. We have a question from Brother Bob Ford. It says, some mission boards have missionaries that their ministry is to fill in for the missionary when he is on furlough. What do you think of this? And I think that's geared to you, because I don't want to answer that one.
Well, Brother Ford, I love you, and I love those mission boards, and I don't think I'm right. I just think it's my opinion. I think if you have to have an American take your place, then somewhere along the way you might have messed up. So I think if you live in terms of I'm training somebody to take over for me, and I'm working towards that, that'll be great. The missionary comes in behind you, very likely is not exactly like you, and things will get messed up. So we train a guy. And he is like us and thinks like us and acts like us, and so we can leave him in charge. In the notes I have for you today, begin immediately giving leadership positions to others and having the people respect them. What you say, how you treat him, if he's paid a salary, and other things will definitely affect what the people think of him. So you are wanting this guy to take over. And so, you're going to give this guy 50 hours a week of teaching and training. He is going to get in 1 year more than a guy would get in 4 years of Bible college in America. He's going to live with you and think like you and talk like you, and you're going to have to honor him. If you want the people to honor him, you will have to honor him. We
get what we respect and what we even put up in front of them, and so it's our responsibility to treat them. It's sad, but many times there's a racism in missions, and that is that we have more of the power of God and we have more of the Holy Spirit than they do, and that's not true at all. And you have to very conscientiously say that, hey, he is a man of God, he can do this, and put it in practice. Don't just call the person, say his name is Jorge. Don't just say, hey, Jorge's going to come up here. Say, Pastor Jorge, even if he's the assistant. You're getting the people to think about this is going to be the one who's taking over. And so treat them, respect them before they ever come to that position. And people will automatically repeat what they hear from you.
From day one, teach them to give and tithe and expect as much from them as you would from an American church. In no way would I act like you're brown or you're black or you're yellow and your church is different. Our God is great. Christianity didn't start with Americans and white people and Europeans. It started with Israelis, Paul getting saved, and Peter and James and John. And we got it later, way later. And so I am definitely going to respect them, and I'm going to expect them to do just as much as I would anybody else that I could possibly be training.
Well, there was a comment here, Pastor, that says you should not count down the days, but at the same time you should count your days. And they said, thank you for that comment. I think it reminds me, you say often that we should plan like we're going to live 1,000 years. So, put it on paper, think about it, think it through, but we should live as if Christ is coming back tomorrow. So on one end, we're going to plan for it. We're not just going to say, well, Lord might come back anyway, so I don't need to think about it, plan the service or whatever else. We're very intentional about all that. But at the same time, we live like Jesus Christ is coming back tomorrow. So with an urgency. That's how we do work. That's how we do missions. That's how we do life.
Well, we got two more things I'd like to say before we close down today. And we head over to Forest Hills at Mountain View to preach tonight in their missions month. And I'm looking forward to that. Appreciate those guys and Brother Keith Hamilton, the pastor there. I put here, need will force them to take the position that is needed in the church. They will never walk if you carry them all the time. So just remember, I must teach them we need them. We can't make it without them. They have to do the job. And so I'm going to be so busy and in so many places, if they're not helping me, we're not going to make it. So that guy's going to preach a lot, and he's going to work it till he can get things going in the ministry there. Jeff, what do you comment on that?
Well, I would say, Pastor, when we're going to start a new church or when we're going to start a new a ministry or Sunday school class or whatever, a lot of times we think backwards. We think, oh, man, I don't have somebody who can lead singing if we do that, or somebody who can teach. Well, maybe that's the best time, because people, they'll fill in the gap when there's a gap needed. But if they're not needed, they're not going to say anything. So we do need the people, and we need to create that environment of needing them. I think that's very important.
Just remember, you get what you look for, you get what you honor, you get what you need. So be needy, be looking, be proud, be honoring them so you can help them and you can get more done. Start a bunch of churches. Okay, go ahead. Do that one.
There's one more question about, do you think churches in the States supporting national pastors for long periods of time is harmful?
Let you go first.
Well, I think that's off subject, Dustin. We don't appreciate that, but no.
It's okay, Dustin. If you put up a like, we're all for it.
I would say this, Dustin. We believe that the best way is, we're sending out missionaries. That's what we want to do. We praise the Lord for those that are doing. There's people that would believe differently. We don't hate them or dislike them. We just feel very strongly that we want to send out. We're trying to recruit. We want to send out more missionaries. So people bringing people over just to support them, if it's to replace American missionaries, we would not agree. We want everybody going out, no matter who it is.
I do think it's okay to help national pastors on a short-time basis, but for long periods of time, I do believe it's harmful because the church needs to pick up its own responsibility. And so I definitely would agree. I think it's harmful, and I want to push them to get where they support their own pastor. Well, thank y'all very much for listening today, man. We thank you for all the comments. I think we got up near 30 people at one time. We're down about 17 now, and we thank you, though, for listening, and thank you for commenting. Man, all you guys talking to us, it helps us a lot. I think Leadership with Vision is far better program than it ever was because I got Jeff Bush with me. And I also think because you're here and this deal we're doing with Facebook Live is helping us, we are recording the podcast. It'll come out in a few weeks, and you can listen to it again. You can put it on double speed and get through it half as much time. So it's 20 minutes. You'll be done with this one. But thank y'all so very much. Keep up the good work. Y'all are being used of God. We're proud of you. We're honored to be able to work with you and excited about what God's doing around the world. And man, Hey, Mary Angela Sanabria says, "Hey, Hefe, it's Miguel." Well, Miguel, you're supposed to use your own account. You should get your mama to let you have your own Facebook account. Don't you think so, Brother Jeff?
I think that would be wise.
You guys be looking forward to it. Maybe, depending on our schedule, maybe tomorrow we'll put an email out and let you guys know if we're going to do anything tomorrow. Thank you for all the different likes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the page. And God bless you. Jeff, tell them about the summit. We really want them to help us get to the summit.
So we have a very big event coming up at the end of the year, December 29th, 30th, 31st, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, last of the year. That'll be the Our Generation Summit. It'll be here in the Atlanta area. We would love to invite you to come to that. You can check us out, visionmissions.com/events. You'll find out the pricing, who's going to be preaching, the classes, and much more. I hope you can make it. That would be great. And allow me to say, jump online, worldevangelism.net. You can find an archive of all these podcasts and so much more material that I know can be a help and a blessing in your ministry as well in your life.
Dustin Brown, you do not have to stay on topic. See, Jeff needs to listen to the message about treating you like his little brother. And Brother Ford, we appreciate you. I'm glad your all's Bible school we're teaching something similar to that. And I have the greatest respect for Bearing Precious Seed and First Baptist Milford, and for you. I have heard about you all of my life, all the time I've been a missionary, so very blessed to know you. And you said on here that you do not believe in supporting nationals because when American funds are gone, many quit. I agree with you 100%. And man, we're honored to get to talk to you guys today. Thank you so much. And I pray God will richly bless all of you. And so we'll be ending this right here. God bless every one of you.